Companions. I don't expect you to believe everything I'm about to tell you, but I appreciate your attention. From what I've heard and read, it's common to think that ghosts are attached to specific places, the house where they lived or the spot where they died. Almost everyone has heard stories about someone encountering a spirit after moving into a new home. For some reason, we always see ourselves as the intruders and these entities as the rightful inhabitants. That's why my story, what I'm about to share, is strange, more unusual than most. I couldn't explain it if I tried. I'm going to tell you what my family has experienced over the past 2 years. I remember exactly when I first noticed it, though for everyone in my family it started at different moments. For me, it was that Sunday night when we were preparing to watch a movie. My father, Diego, is a film enthusiast who still keeps VHS tapes from a video rental store he owned until around 2005, when it stopped being profitable. My brother Mateo and I had chosen The People Behind the Walls. A few minutes into the film, something caught our attention, a voice, a small voice singing a song, The Blue Star from Pinocchio. It took us a moment to realize that this voice, which seemed to belong to a little girl singing or humming, wasn't coming from the television. Dad stopped the movie and looked at us completely confused. "What was that?" he asked, and began to carefully check every room and corner of the house. I'm not sure why, but something about the voice terrified us. It made us realize this wasn't something good. It's not instinctive to be frightened by the sound of a girl humming a song, except perhaps when you know there's no little girl in your house. When Dad checked the last corner, the singing stopped. I've never been able to listen to that song again, and I can't even bring myself to watch Pinocchio. Dad wanted us to continue watching the movie that night, pretending nothing had happened. But deep down, we all knew something had changed forever. I remember even the popcorn had a bitter taste. There's a certain hopelessness, a feeling that no one can help you when you know something that isn't alive is inhabiting your home. 2 or 3 days later, I woke up in the middle of the night to my mother Lucia's desperate screams. Seconds later, I heard Dad trying to calm her. When I ran to my parents' bedroom, Mateo was already standing at the door. Mom was crying, sitting beside the bed, and Dad was holding her against his chest. He told us to go to Grandmother's room and sleep together there. That room had been unoccupied since Grandmother died years ago, but still contained all her things. It's also the only room on the second floor without windows, which is precisely why Dad sent us there. By morning, we learned what had caused Mom's scream. She had a nightmare about that first night when we heard the girl singing. But in the dream, Mom was alone, searching desperately throughout the house. Something compelled her to find this girl. Suddenly, a piercing scream frightened her, a scream that seemed to come from inside her own head. She opened her eyes, waking to realize she was the one screaming, and right in front of her in the window of the second-floor bedroom was the face of a little girl without eyes, smiling from ear to ear while appearing to float, just watching her. Dad woke up at that moment. The difficult part for him was calming Mom and convincing her there was nothing in the window when he could see it too. This being this thing, whatever it is, not a girl, suddenly arrived at our house and decided to dwell there, tormenting us. Although I can't say we didn't believe in ghosts before, the truth is we had never experienced anything remotely supernatural. My parents began living in constant stress. Sometimes we could be in good spirits, even joking around, until we noticed the sun beginning to set, night falling. The girl started becoming less shy with us. The first time I saw her was while passing from the dining room to the living room, carrying my computer to do homework with the TV as background noise, a bad habit of mine. From the corner of my eye, I saw a white smudge on the table as if an animal were on it. I froze in place. A laugh nearly gave me a heart attack. I stood motionless, but from the corner of my eye I could see what appeared to be a girl in a white dress sitting on the table like a gargoyle, hunched between her knees, rubbing her hands like a fly and smiling. I don't know how, but I can swear on my life she was smiling. She rose, standing on the table slowly. This thing with the appearance of a girl stood up, and I'm certain she didn't fit her head, had to bend when it reached the ceiling. Mateo and I were alone, and I don't know why, but my only reaction was to call for my mother to scream for her. Mateo heard me and came running, and that thing vanished into the air. I think it's significant that in that panic attack I called for my mom even though she wasn't there. I still do whenever I feel afraid, even though my mother is no longer with us. They say ghosts can't hurt you, but I witnessed how these energies consumed my mother gradually night after night until one day she couldn't take it anymore. 3 months after everything began, this thing made itself visible more frequently in glimpses out of the corner of our eyes, positioning itself behind us and then disappearing. But it appeared directly to my mom and howled like a child, with an old face sometimes, without eyes, with increasingly decaying skin, but always with a macabre smile. It was a Tuesday like any other. I had spent the entire afternoon with my boyfriend, and at 7:30 I received that call from my father. My mother had decided to end her life locking herself in grandmother's room, the only place where that thing didn't enter. Mateo found her shortly afterward. The ambulance personnel told my father she had died only minutes before Mateo called emergency services. For months, only Dad and I knew this detail. We didn't want to torment Mateo with the idea that if he had arrived a few minutes earlier, perhaps he could have saved Mom. But we only told him when he shared that on that cursed day, it took him longer to enter because when opening the door, someone was pushing from inside and laughing. That little girl's laugh, the same laugh we heard all that night, as if mocking us. I wish so much this were fiction just in my head. When there's a loss like this, when someone decides they can't go on the reaction from distant relatives, those outside the immediate family circle, is to think the family had something to do with it, that the family could have done something to prevent it. Suddenly we felt more alone than ever. Mom's family practically stopped caring about us after the funeral. Mom never told them what was happening, and let's be realistic for a moment, would you? Would you ask for help because there's a spirit tormenting you at home? In this solitude, the thing with the appearance of a girl seemed to grow stronger. It began focusing on Mateo, who became its favorite person to torment. Somehow, this entity rummaged through Mateo's belongings. We returned from eating at one of my father's friends' houses to find Mateo's diary open with letters and mementos scattered throughout the house, with one of his dolls in my father's room. Things that were safely stored in Mateo's closet had been taken out handled and appeared dirty throughout the house. Mateo cried desperately while we helped him reorganize everything. Dad went downstairs for a broom and dustpan to clean up some broken glass, and returned with Mateo's first communion dress in his arms. In the darkness of the living room, he said he had seen the dress floating upright as if someone barely visible was wearing it. When he turned on the light, the dress was already on the floor with a penetrating, horrible, disgusting smell of putrefaction. I want to clarify that moving houses is something we cannot afford, and it's even out of the question, especially because this is our mother's house, the house where we grew up, and we won't leave just because this filth has decided to live here. It won't defeat us. Praying blessing, cleaning the house my brother and mother had tried. We had noticed that when they got too scared and started praying, this thing seemed to enjoy itself, seemed to take the opportunity to mock them. Despite not thinking it would solve anything, Dad spoke with a priest, Father Santiago, a very close friend of my mother's family. He reluctantly agreed to come bless the house. Evidently, Dad didn't explain exactly what was happening, and I suppose the priest thought it was more about dealing with the loss of a loved one and the place where she chose to take her life. He arrived accompanied by an elderly woman, Doña Teresa, who helped him with church duties. He walked around the house, delivering blessings in Spanish, some in Latin, and left. That same night, very late, a knock at the door surprised us. It was the elderly woman. She asked to come in, and we invited her for coffee. She asked us to be honest and tell her what was really happening in the house. I think it was the first time we were truly honest with someone outside the family, the first time we were honest about it. Doña Teresa inspired so much confidence in us and really showed she believed us that we ended up in tears, telling her absolutely everything that had happened. The girl wouldn't stop laughing at 3 in the morning when the elderly woman left for home, and although my father offered to drive her, she refused. "You must be strong and take care of each other more than ever," she told us. The next morning she showed up with holy water religious figures and a very elderly man who transmitted a calmness we truly needed. He was a retired priest, and Doña Teresa had briefed him on the situation. The man was very concerned that this thing living in my house had been able to physically stop the door on that occasion while my mother was dying. "I've seen too many things in my life, and many of them I still don't understand," he told us. "I believe in God, and I have seen hell and many beings that came escaping from hell between us." He stayed all day. We went out for most of the afternoon and returned in the evening to find him still in the house, very exhausted. He said that at his age he lacked the strength to face a being like this. Nevertheless, he promised to return every month to bless the house, to try to rid it of these forces, these things, as many times as necessary. For 3 days we had peace, until the others arrived. We tried to go out as much as possible, even visiting friends of my father, whom we hadn't seen in years, some with whom I'm sure he wasn't even on good terms. During one of these visits, my father received a call. It was a neighbor. Something was happening at the house. I received a WhatsApp message from Uncle Raphael, my mother's brother, who owns a small restaurant a few blocks from our house. He asked us to come there immediately. When we arrived home, we found what seemed to be all the neighbors on the street outside our house, which had its doors open, all lights on, and shadows walking past the windows. A few hours earlier, horrible screams had started coming from our house, desperate screams of pain and others full of laughter and vulgarities. The neighbors came out of their houses to approach, but no one dared enter. Someone called the police. Another neighbor only managed to run to my uncle's restaurant to tell him something was happening with us, or at least that's what they thought. When he arrived and heard the screams, he broke one of the windows without hesitation and went in. He disappeared into the darkness while the neighbors watched from outside. The screams stopped shortly after, but he didn't come out. Minutes later, 2 police patrol cars arrived, alerted by the neighbors. They forced the door to enter and found my uncle unconscious, providing him with first aid. When we arrived, the neighbors were crowding the small entrance to the garden, and my uncle was receiving attention in an ambulance. The shadows we saw through the windows were at least 3 officers checking the house from top to bottom. When he saw us, my uncle approached and embraced us like he hadn't in a long time. He hugged us tightly and told us he had entered to look for us, and the house was much darker than would be normal despite being a full moon night. Inside, he couldn't see anything at all. The lights wouldn't turn on. He ran to the 2nd floor where the screams were coming from, and there, right at the entrance to grandmother's room, dimly illuminated by the light from the window at the end of the hallway, was a little girl with an old woman's face, smiling at him from ear to ear. The girl was holding hands with a very tall woman, a naked woman with skin falling off her body. He couldn't believe what he was seeing and tried to turn on his phone's flashlight. When he did, there was no one at the door anymore. He tried to run downstairs, but something hit him in the stomach. He had bumped into something, although it was right in front of him, he couldn't see it. The darkness was such that it was as if his eyes were closed. He thought it was a piece of furniture and extended his hands to touch it. A wet, hard ball. Then he felt a few hairs on it and skin falling off at the touch of his fingers. Something laughed, and he felt in his hands the loud laughter of the girl while he held her head. The next thing he knew, the next thing he saw was a policeman trying to revive him. I had never seen him like that, not even at my mother's funeral. My uncle was crying like a child as he told us what had happened. My father asked him why with those screams, what the hell made him enter our dark house to look for us instead of waiting for the police. Because one of the voices that was screaming was your mother's, he told us. I haven't seen the videos where my brother tells our story. It's not because I mind that he did it. He asked me before contacting you. I simply can't. Don't blame me or feel bad about it. It's just something I don't want to relive, not this way. I also ask that you excuse me if I don't want to talk about my mom's death, about what happened that day. I don't know if I'll ever really be ready to do it again. I hate being in this house as much as I hate the ones who came to it to change our lives, the house where all our memories are, where I remember my mother, grandmother, where I grew up. The same house that neighbors now avoid, where people cross the street to avoid walking in front of it. No one visits us anymore. Nobody likes being in a house where you hear footsteps, where there's a voice that laughs at you if for some reason you find yourself alone at some point. In the downstairs bathroom where visitors used to go, you can permanently hear a woman's breathing. Since what happened with my uncle when the police came, some neighbors stopped talking to us, and I understand them. I would have done the same. Every time I return from school and pass by my uncle's little diner, he asks if anyone is at home. If I say no, he doesn't let me come alone. He prepares something for me to eat until Mateo Dad, or until my cousin comes and accompanies me. My cousin, one of Mateo's friends, his girlfriend, Doña Teresa, and Father Santiago, are the only people who still dare to enter my house. Father Santiago told us about what happened in my room from the first time he came. On that occasion, as I understood it, he dedicated himself to working throughout the house. But when he returned, he concentrated on my bedroom and prayed for a very long time. At one point, he even called Doña Teresa to come in too. While Father Santiago was praying on his knees by the window, they heard something fall on the roof, and he continued, accustomed to hearing even worse things in the house. But whatever fell began to drag itself. They could hear it dragging across the roof until it reached the corner of the room above my closet opposite to where he was. He heard the door open slowly. Without stopping his prayer, he turned around but couldn't see anything despite feeling in his chest a gaze that pierced him from the darkness of the closet. I don't know if my brother mentioned it, but here these entities can only be seen from the corner of the eye in reflections from windows and sometimes in mirrors. Only that time and my mother saw them materialize head-on. Knowing this, Father Santiago took my vertical mirror and placed it in the corner of the room right in front of the closet door, and continued his prayer facing it so he could observe what was happening. In the darkness, a figure began to take shape, as if approaching, preparing to come out. Minutes passed, and he thought it might be his imagination playing tricks on him. He then stood in front of the window, opened it outward a few centimeters, just enough to reflect toward the closet door. As soon as he positioned it, he saw a huge, fat woman with gray, disheveled hair coming out, walking toward him so quickly that he didn't have time to clearly see her face. That was when he called Doña Teresa, and she was the one who told us everything the priest had seen. To me, he only said it was preferable that I sleep in grandmother's room. That fat woman present was the third to arrive. She doesn't go down to the first floor. We can recognize her heavy footsteps and deep breathing when we close the doors at night and she walks down the hallway. Sometimes it's so easy to forget everything and think that everything is like before. I remember a particularly nice day I had at school. After my mom's death, it had been very difficult for me to socialize. Not long before, one of my best friends had moved away from the city. On the day I'm mentioning, my friends had a surprise for me after school. Even the teacher let us out a few minutes early. Everyone had agreed, and suddenly, out of nowhere, my best friend Lucia, sharing my mother's name, appeared. We hugged, cried, then composed ourselves and laughed. We all went to eat together. I realized how beautiful my group of friends is and how much I was missing by not spending time with them. We planned to see each other that night, and one of my friends brought me home. He told me how much I mattered to him, how much he missed me, and how much it hurt him that I wasn't with them like before. I was very glad to feel so loved and supported. I entered the house, and even the light coming through the windows seemed to illuminate it differently as it hadn't done in a long time. I went to my room and lay down. Perhaps because of the emotions of the day, I fell into a deep sleep in just minutes. I dreamed of my friends, the boy who had just brought me home the last vacation we had as a family years ago. And suddenly that laugh again. That damn stupid laugh that seemed to creep into my dreams to tell me that no, nothing was fine. The house was still infested. My mom was no longer there. Neither Mateo, my group, nor I were the same anymore. I remember opening my eyes and what I saw, I don't know if still in 3 dreams, was that horrible fat woman floating right above me, right above my bed, stretching her arms toward me and screaming. Screaming with her face because I couldn't hear her, but I could see her expression and her empty black eyes. I remember running. I remember leaving my room, my house, and going to my uncle's restaurant to wait until Mateo arrived. My cousin arrived first, and she accompanied me back home. I had messages from Lucia and some other friends. They were about to pick me up for that sleepover that had excited me so much hours before. I took what I needed when Mateo arrived. I didn't tell him what had happened to me. He was in a good mood and smiling, and it's so rare for that to happen now that I didn't want to ruin his day. And before I could finish convincing him, my friends were already calling me from outside. Dad smiled and shrugged while I hugged him and ran out. We left my cousin at home and went to buy something to eat. For a few hours I lived a normal life, lived what I suppose every girl my age should live until they arrived there too. Until suddenly I saw that girl observing me from outside the window, that girl with an old face smiling, wearing, I'm sure, Mateo's first communion dress. I felt like I was going to faint, but somehow my desire not to be the weird one, not to be the one who suffers, who always calls attention, made me control myself and pretend nothing was happening, as if I wasn't seeing it. I don't know how, but I did it, and I did it all night. When we went to sleep, I also pretended to do so. That was when at least I realized that no matter where we go, they will follow us. Weeks later, one afternoon, eating at my uncle's restaurant, waiting for Dad or Mateo to pass by, I received a call. A boy from school talking to me in an unusually serious tone. A boy from another class who isn't aware of everything that has happened to me lately. "Elena, are you at your family's restaurant?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Shit, no kidding," I heard him say, followed by a long silence. Then he continued with an extremely nervous tone. "Don't be scared, seriously. Some friends and I were playing with a Ouija board, just joking around as always." Soon it seemed like we really started talking to someone to something, and it mentioned you. It told us where you were right now and how many things, like living in your house. I want to write this as a farewell, as a thank you to all those who worried about us, who asked for our emails to write us advice. And to those acquaintances who, upon hearing this case in your video through your channel, recognized our story and have approached my family again. And yes, it is a farewell because despite the support, despite knowing that we are no longer alone against this, things have not improved since we decided to tell about it. On the contrary, we have now counted 12 different beings in the house. 5 of them arrived after the publication of our story on your channel. I wouldn't want to think it's a consequence of this, since we haven't even listened to your videos here in the house, only the phone calls we had with you just a few weeks ago. After your last call, we had a quite peaceful night, really too peaceful. It felt at times like before all this started. We talked, all of us here, and remembered my mom. There were no footsteps, no laughter coming from an empty room, no breathing emerging from the darkness. Nothing. Someone knocking on the door of my bedroom woke me up past 2 in the morning. It was Mateo begging for help. Something had happened to Dad. I jumped out of bed and saw my father lying at the bottom of the stairs. I thought he was unconscious, that's how he looked, but he just couldn't move. We called an ambulance and it arrived just minutes later. When we went out to the ambulance, I noticed that the neighbors were watching us, some from their windows, others on the sidewalk, but none approached to ask us what was happening. Perhaps it's my imagination, but I felt the fear, the uncertainty in their gazes as Mateo and I followed the ambulance to the hospital. On the way, I remembered what my father had been able to explain to us amid the pain he was feeling. He was still reviewing some things for work after staying up talking with us until late. He was heading to the kitchen to put away his coffee cup and was going down the stairs when he heard a call behind him. He says it sounded like my voice. He didn't see anything in the darkness. He stepped down a stair and felt two hands pushing him forcefully downward. He fell very badly. The sound woke Mateo, who came out and upon seeing him came to ask me for help. And that was the starting point for these things, the ones that have arrived, to be able to touch us, to be able to physically influence us. And we are afraid, all of us too afraid. With Dad recovering from a broken arm and back injury from the fall, we received a call from Javier, the son of a very close friend of my father, to whom he had recently told about our situation. Javier is about 10 years older than me, but I've known him since I was a child. He's a great person, a very close friend of my parents and of us, with a tremendous faith in God. His family is Mormon, and Javier offered to stay with us for a weekend to calm us down, to talk to us about God and stop seeing these things. Somehow, I think he wasn't convinced that what we were experiencing was real. He even got to talk with Father Santiago and Doña Teresa, who had come to visit my father. The priest talked with Javier for a long time, and I felt that changed his view of the circumstances a bit. I don't know what they talked about. We took turns attending to my father, even Javier, with a naturalness as if he were family. Afterward, we sat in the living room and tried to watch TV, but no one was paying attention, so we decided to turn it off and talk among the three of us. I got lost in a magazine I was flipping through, and Javier and my brother continued chatting for a while. I heard Javier laugh in a very strange way, almost macabre, and then Mateo fell silent. I looked up and saw Javier looking at me with a very nervous smile. He continued talking and the laugh repeated, and that's when I saw that it wasn't him. Someone was laughing behind him. My brother and I stood up and told him to come with us, but he refused. He wanted to sit there as if nothing was happening. But finally we convinced him, although he still refused to believe what had just happened to him. We drank coffee. Mateo said goodbye to go to his room, but not without first stopping by Dad's room to see if he needed anything. I asked Javier if he needed anything else, but he said everything was fine. I helped him prepare one of the sofas for him to sleep on, and I went upstairs to try to get some sleep. A while later, I heard movement on the ground floor and thought it was Javier in the kitchen. The noises continued. Fatigue overcame me, and I fell asleep only to wake up to a rather loud sound, something that had fallen. I didn't know whether to go down or not if something was happening, so I sent him a message a few minutes later to ask if everything was okay, and he replied that yes, that I shouldn't go down. He heard voices on the lower level, faint, distant, slow. I thought about going to see what was happening, but then the footsteps outside my door, the heavy footsteps and tired breathing let me know that the fat woman was outside, so I endured and fell asleep a while later. In the morning, Javier was talking with my father. He had an exhausted face as if he hadn't slept in days. Without saying much to me, he left, but later I found out what had happened to him. When he tried to sleep in the living room, he heard breathing coming from the visitor's bathroom. This is normal for us, but evidently he didn't know it wasn't accustomed to it. Without turning on the lights, he got up and approached the bathroom. He closed the door. When he was about to return to the sofa in the darkness, he saw a silhouette hiding behind the sofa where he was sleeping. Carefully, he approached the center table to get his phone and turn on the flashlight. There was no trace of anyone. He lay down and closed his eyes. As he did so, he felt someone get on the sofa, and before he could react, he felt a bite on his face, on his cheek, almost on the jaw, a bite from a mouth without teeth. In the darkness, opening his eyes and struggling, he thought he saw an old woman on top of him, and somehow he threw himself off the sofa. He quickly turned on the living room light, but there was no one, no sign of a saint, or whatever he felt on him. He went outside and tried to sleep in the car. From there, he could see the curtains moving in my father's room as if someone were looking out. My father was alone and couldn't walk, and when he received a message from me, he asked me not to leave my room. I'm sorry to tell you that this is all I want to share. There are intense things, personal things that have happened in these last days, especially to my brother and my father. I want to spare them somehow from strangers on the internet who surely have never gone through situations like this, accusing them of being liars. And I don't regret at all having shared this with you. As I said, it has helped us. People have reached out. But after seeing certain reactions, it's something I wouldn't recommend. There are times when even your own family doesn't believe you and treats you like you're crazy. Imagine when you decide to publish it, and I'm not referring to that minority of comments your channel has received, but those made by friends of friends who have shared our story on their walls, pointing out that they know us. And it's very sad to see the reaction of people who don't believe in these kinds of things. We haven't given up, and we're going to move. Yes, we're going to move as soon as we can. Hopefully by the middle of next month, Father Santiago will go to bless it. And I hope we can be at peace for a month, a week, a day. To rest one night like before is all I want. Yes, I will tell you if something happens, but I hope not. I hope not to have to write to you again, hope not to have to tell you many of the things that have remained untold, but know that if you don't hear from us again, we will have had our happy ending. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for having listened. Thank you to all who have worried about us, who have dedicated a prayer or advice to us. Thank you for everything. As the recording ends, there's a faint, barely audible sound. Elena. Did you think you could escape us, child? We don't belong to that house. We belong to your family. Your mother sends her regards from down here.